So new World Eaters rules revealed today. Berserkers have 5 attacks and can get up to AP-4. Kharn the Betrayer looks like he's got nerfed, and there's some tweaks to the Legion trait and some upgrade options. Let's take a look at what we've got for the Angriest Legion. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about the World Eaters, and more specifically doing a full review for their White Dwarf Index Hereticus for their updated rules to fit in with the new Chaos Space Marine Codex. They're going to be getting a full-on codex release sometime later in the year, something akin to Death Guard or Thousand Sons, but this is to make them work in the meantime when the Codex Chaos Space Marines comes out, which is likely to be in the next few weeks. The rules for the White Dwarf Index have been uploaded online, and we did kind of already know what we were getting. 2 datasheets, one for Khorne Berserkers and one for Kharn the Betrayer, an updated Legion trait for Red Butchers, updated detachment rules for how you field World Eaters in the new Codex, and then their mini-Codex supplemental rules, Warlord traits, relics and stratagems. Most of these are fairly similar to how they were before, but there are a few interesting and slightly more powerful tweaks. We'll take a look at the datasheet first, then go through to the updated trait and detachment rules, and then look at the supplemental bits. I'd say perhaps the single most interesting thing out of the whole thing is the new Khorne Berserkers datasheet, which I think a lot of people were waiting to see. Previously, Khorne Berserkers did hit fairly hard, as they just swung with an enormous amount of attacks due to fighting twice, though with only 1 wound they were kind of glass cannons. Against a fair few targets they just didn't really have the AP to be meaningful, and with their low defense as well, you did have the opportunity to interrupt before they fought a second time and maybe kill a bunch of the squad dead. The new datasheet appears to have made some things better but some things worse, and they are going to play a bit differently. First up, it appears that they remain an elite's choice unless you field them in a World Eater's army, in which case they'll be troops. They cost 22 points per model, which is up from 17, kind of to be expected, and it's sort of similar to what Thousand Sons and Plague Marines got when they got their new codex and second wound added on. You can't take them in big squad sizes anymore. You're limited to the more usual 5 to 10 which most Chaos Space Marines come in, though to be honest I think fielding them in huge numbers of greater than 10 wasn't usually the best strategy anyway. The issue wasn't usually that they didn't have enough numbers to make the damage happen. Stat line wise, there's 3 updates. They still move 6 inches, hit on 3s, and have strength 5 and toughness 4. They've gone up to 2 wounds alongside the other Chaos Marines, so they'll be decently tankier. You're not just going to get bolt guns and las guns removing them en masse anymore. Their attacks have skipped all the way up from 3 to 5, and they've increased to leadership 8 from a leadership of 7 before. I would bear in mind that for the attacks characteristic, we have rolled in Hateful Assault, and they no longer seem to get an extra attack from chain swords, so arguably their attack numbers haven't really changed all that much. The wounds thing is really significant though, and the champion still gets the normal +1 attack on leadership, taking him up to a pretty ludicrous 6 attacks. Melee-wise, their chain axes have been replaced by a generic rule called Berserker Chain Blades. These ones count for the chain swords or the chain axes, I guess, and they get a little bit more AP than they did before. Their strength user AP-2 and damage 1. Realistically though, I think they're almost always going to be fighting on AP-3, as there's a very cheap 5-point upgrade to take a Chaos Icon in the unit. That one allows you to ignore combat attrition modifiers, but perhaps more importantly, means that all of your attacks in melee get to AP-3, and that's pretty significant, should be enough to threaten other Space Marines even with Armour of Contempt. It's not all good news though, they can't take Power Fists anymore, so you lack that extra bit of combat punch against heavies. You can still take 2 Plasma Pistols, but they have unfortunately lost their ability to fight twice, which could be a way to effectively double the attacks before. Realistically, it means that despite increasing in points, each model will be swinging with fewer attacks than previously, but it does mean that all of those attacks will be decently better AP. Previously, a standard Berserker would have 2 attacks, sorry not 3 as I said earlier, then you get 1 for Hateful Assault and probably 1 for an Astartes Chainsword as well alongside your Chain Axe, so they could typically expect around 8 attacks made at strength 5 or 6 and AP-1. Instead of 8 attacks at that profile, you're going to be getting 5 at strength 5 and AP-3, so they might be a little bit less effective at just obliterating hordes, but should go through heavy infantry a lot more easily. Otherwise, for special rules, they have Let the Galaxy Burn, which I'm going to guess is going to be the generic Chaos Space Marine one, encompassing a few things like Bolter Discipline and probably their version of combat doctrines. If the rumours are to be believed, that means from round 3 they'll get exploding 6s to hit in combat as well, which is pretty handy. And they do get an additional strength buff on the first round of combat, Mark of Khorne gives them +1 strength whenever they charge, were charged, or made a heroic intervention, so that means that those attacks will typically be coming at strength 6 unless you're bogged down in combat. Overall, I think that the unit is probably slightly improved, though I don't think there's too much in it. They've certainly gone from a bit more of a glass cannon unit to something that can take a punch a bit better. Out of a unit of 10 of these, you'd realistically be expecting 51 attacks on the charge at strength 6, AP -3 and damage 1. That is going to destroy just about most infantry units unless they're very, very heavily armoured with a ton of wounds, and at least they'll be a bit harder to shift when your enemy strikes back. Finally, keyword wise, they have Core, the Legion keyword, which means that they can be taken from other things that aren't World Eaters, the Mark of Chaos keyword, which might well key off some stratagems, and also Traitoris Astartes. I believe that that's going to be the Core Chaos Codex keyword, in a similar sort of way to the Tyranids gaining Hive Tendril. Overall though, I think they're looking pretty lethal. Having a bunch of these angry boys charge out of a rhino still seems very intimidating. Next up, we've got Kharn the Betrayer, who I must admit I'm not quite as positive about his rules update. He's gone up quite severely in points, up to 140 from 115, and he just doesn't really seem to do a lot different to what he did before. Still though, I guess he was one of the stronger Chaos characters, at least in my opinion, before, so he still looks usable to me. Stat line wise, he hasn't had that many changes. His strength has gone up to 6, but it's kind of just rolling Gorechild's +1 strength bonus into the core profile, and it's gained an extra attack to go to 6, but this is probably just rolling in Hateful Assault, so it hasn't really changed there. Gorechild is largely similar, it remains AP -4 and has changed from D3 damage to 2 damage, so a bit weaker against -1 damage modifiers there. They've changed the wording slightly on the automatic hitting thing, it no longer auto hits on 2s, but it ignores weapon skill modifiers instead. It's still going to hit quite a bit, though it isn't going to be able to profit from his own World Eater's rerolls anymore though, so he will be missing things a bit more often than previously. Otherwise, his plasma pistol's just the same. It's always locked into overcharge mode because he's a very angry guy, though if you do overcharge it, it only deals 1 mortal wound to him and not outright kills him like other characters. Then special rules wise, he's got quite a lot going on. He's got the 4+ invul save, Let the Galaxy Burn that we'll find out about. He also has the Mark of Khorne, so he's often going to be hitting on strength 7 in the first round of melee. And his buffing abilities have been changed a bit. Previously, he only buffed World Eaters units that he was very close to, but he did have the chance of killing them a bit. Now he gives a reroll 1's buff to World Eaters in melee, which is much worse, but he can access it when he's safely out of range of killing his own men. Speaking of which, his signature Betrayer rule means that if there's any friendly models within 3 inches at the end of the movement phase, they'll take 2 mortal wounds on a 2+ as he casually offs one with his Gorechild axe. So I guess if you want him to be a support piece, then you want to keep your unit outside of 3 inches, but within 6 inches, though I guess that could make him a bit easier to target for things like Lookout Sir. This applies at the end of your movement phase, so I guess there'd be a possibility for both charging the same target, getting stuck into the enemy, and then moving him safely out of harm's reach after you've done killing. Perhaps the single nicest thing for Kharn though is that he didn't lose the Blood for the Blood God rule, and he can still fight twice in melee. So provided whatever you're trying to kill doesn't interrupt and kill him back, it means that you'd usually expect 12 attacks out at the strength 6 or 7 and AP -4 damage 2. Usually going to be enough to put a decent dent in most things, particularly elite infantry. For me, he still seems alright for the points, though I think that he's probably been nerfed from this just because he's gone up from 115 to 140. Still powerful, though I think you could argue he was probably even a bit undercosted for the sheer amount of pain that he could bring in his previous incarnation. Not really something that you can say about most Chaos units. Then we come on to the World Eaters rules in general. As I mentioned in the previous video, it does indeed appear that Butcher's Nails are getting a bit improved. It's +1 attack on the first round of melee, i.e. when you're charged or make a heroic intervention as well, and not just when you're doing the charging. Quite a nice little quality of life improvement there. Lots of other armies in 40k are going to want to get stuck into you as well as you into them. So good that the World Eaters are going to be equally dangerous when people are charging into them as when they're charging in themselves. It does mean that if you are playing a World Eaters Khorne Berserker squad, you could typically expect 61 attacks at strength 6, AP -4 and damage 1. And very little in the game is going to want to get in the way of all that, particularly if you're toughness 5 and below. Otherwise, they reaffirm a couple of the World Eaters detachment restrictions. It sounds like there's going to be some units in the Chaos Codex that get the undivided mark, and they must swap it for a Mark of Khorne. That's the one that seems to give you the +1 strength in the first round of combat now. and as before you can't take any Slaanesh, Nurgle or Tzeentch models, the Legion is devoted to Khorne. Otherwise there's a few interesting clarifications as to how the Berserkers and Kharn will fit into detachments. It seems that as the Berserkers have the Legion keyword, you can take them in non-World Eaters detachments as well. If so, then they become an elite slot, but the only Legion trait that they can ever receive will be the World Eaters trait, so it means that if you take them along Night Lords, say, then they just won't get that extra attack. It was rumoured that Rubric Marines and Plague Marines and things will be going that way as well. Basically not really core parts of the other legions, but can be taken along as supporting units in the elite slot. And it seems alright to me, to be honest. It looks like they'd still be able to get other buffs from the Chaos Codex, as they do have that Legion tag. So say if you had a Night Lord's Lord, it still at least looks like you'd probably be able to give them his reroll ones. As I mentioned earlier, Berserkers do appear to be troops in World Eaters detachments, so that means that they'll be easier to spam and you can get OBSEC on them. Particularly the latter part's a bit more interesting now they don't die to a stiff breeze. Otherwise, we've got character upgrades like Warlord traits and relics, and then a page of stratagems. Looking through these, as best I can tell, the vast majority have kept almost exactly the same as the ones from the previous supplement in Warzone Charadon, but a few little ones have changed from each section. The Warlord traits are largely melee focused. There's one for gaining attacks and strength as you kill characters and monsters and things. That one's Kharn's, and it's kind of annoying as it's not very good. Arch Slaughterer gives you D3 attacks if there's more enemies or friendlies less than 3 inches from your character. A decent buff but a bit unreliable. Disciple of Khorne allows you to reroll hits and wounds against enemy characters or enemy models with a wounds characteristic of 5 or more. That one's a little bit focused on certain targets but very powerful if you say contact a vehicle. Violent Urgency is a 6-inch aura of +1 to advance and charge, and this one isn't core locked either, so it still looks like it had applied to the character in question, which is quite nice for charges out of Rhinos or Reserve, I suppose. The one that's changed is True Berserker. This one was usually halving the damage taken in melee attacks, now it's just halving damage taken in general. Makes it a lot more generally usable, that, and if you want a durability increase on say a Terminator World Eater's Lord, then that one seems okay. Finally we have Battle Lust, a 6-inch heroic intervention and always fights first. I guess that one's alright, and it can use your character to protect other units, and make it pretty hard to charge just the units without also dealing with your tooled up character as well. Perhaps Violent Urgency and Disciple of Khorne might be my favourites out of that section. Then we've got the relics. The Crimson Killer is a plasma pistol with strength 9, AP -3 and damage 3, and also deals a mortal wound on a 4+. As relic pistols goes, it's not too bad. One anti-tank shot if you want it. Gorefather has now been slightly updated. You used to have to replace a chain axe with this to get the strength +2, AP -2 and damage 3 axe, and wound rolls of 6 cause 3 mortal wounds. It seems likely that Chaos Lords might not be able to take a chain axe as that's no longer counted as an option. You now have to use it to replace a power axe or an exalted power axe, which I'm strongly suspecting is what we saw on the Chaos Terminator datasheet, basically a power axe but with a damage characteristic of 2. In any case, it looks like a solid enough upgrade on the standard one. An extra pip of damage and mortal wound chances doesn't hurt. The Banner of Rage is the once per game priest buff to give +1 attack to World Eaters units within 6 inches at the start of the fight phase. This one hasn't changed at all, and it's not core locked either, so it applies to characters and vehicles and things. The Berserker Glaive has seen a buff. It replaces a power axe, exalted power axe, or the Master of Executions' axe, and previously this was strength +1 and AP -2. It's now strength +2, AP -3 and damage 2. So it actually makes it a weapon that you might consider using and not a downgrade on some of them, though perhaps more importantly it gives you a 5+ feel no pain as well. It's weird that that's a relic weapon that is actually more of a durability upgrade and only a small improvement to the AP. Then there's the Helm of Furore, an infantry only one that gives you +2 strength but means that you have to declare charges against any unit that's within 8 inches that you can. Not the best combat buffing relic in my opinion. And finally we have Blood Hunger. This one is one where you regenerate wounds for enemy models slain. For some reason they've decided to make this one worse when it was already kind of questionable to pick up. Previously you'd regenerate wounds on a 4+, now it's only a 5, and you can't get more than 6 wounds regenerated per turn for some reason, as if you're ever going to reach that kind of cap. You'd have to kill 24 models in a single fight phase to average that sort of thing, so I don't know why they bothered capping it. Overall I thought it was maybe a bit questionable besides perhaps on a Demon Prince. Now it just seems pretty rubbish really. Lastly, for rule sections we come to stratagems. Again, most of these are unchanged. We've got Scorn of Sorcery, the nice one to deny a psychic power on a 4+. Apoplectic Frenzy still remains, a pre-game move of an infantry unit 9 inches, which is really quite nice for tougher berserkers. Getting a big unit of 10 of them into the midfield in cover could give you a great place to assault from the next turn. Skulls for the Skull Throne is the one that you kill an enemy character in melee with one of yours for D3 CP. And I'm kind of pleasantly surprised that the Red Butcher's Terminators is still there just the same as it was. 2 CP to give a Terminator unit +1 strength and fights twice with Blood from the Blood God. And honestly, I think that this is going to be so much powerful in the new Chaos decks. The Terminators are going to be bigger, tougher, and perhaps hit harder with other synergies, so upgrading one of the units to fight twice could hopefully give you an Anvil unit that's also going to just absolutely chew up anything it gets a hold of. For 1 CP, Kill Maim Burn allows you to consolidate 6 inches rather than 3. If it makes the difference of getting to an objective or locking up the enemy, then so much the better. For 1 CP, Wild Fury improves melee AP by -1, which means that you could get your Berserkers all the way up to AP -4 with this. If you're fighting Terminators or other Armour of Contempt, then it's not the worst. And the one that's been updated is Stoke the Nails. This one makes the unit considered to be in Wanted Slaughter. This is the rumoured Chaos Doctrine for exploding 6s to hit, and it also gains +1 strength as well into the bargain. Previously, it was a buff to Death to the False Emperor, which no longer exists, and this one just seems like a really solid melee boost stratagem, to be honest. Exploding 6s to hit is usually going to be an extra 25% damage, potentially on a very big scary unit, and if the strength differential actually makes a difference, then it's going to compound into well over 50% damage increase. Who doesn't want Strength 7 Berserkers hitting on AP -4 with exploding 6s? Finally, for 2 CP, Blood for the Blood God remains. This one's a bit more underwhelming in my opinion. Kill an enemy unit in the fight phase, and it'll mean that your entire army will auto pass morale in the ensuing morale phase. That one's always seemed unlikely to ever really see play. So overall, I wouldn't call this the most enormous groundbreaking changes to World Eaters. I'd say it maybe represents a little bit of a side grade overall. Berserkers are tankier and much better AP, though they did lose their fights twice ability. A bit better against elite infantry, a bit worse against massive hordes. Kharn seems just generally a little bit weaker given the points cost increase. The Legion buff is kind of nice, and the minimal changes to the traits and stratagems maybe don't make too much difference, though the units that they might be applied to in the new Chaos decks are likely to be better. Probably the ones from those that have me the most interested are Stoke the Nails, which seems like a great melee buff, and the Red Butcher's Terminators, which I think will be a popular choice. Despite maybe this index not actually giving you massive amounts of buffs, I still think that overall the Legion is going to be much stronger, though the strength is probably going to come from the new Chaos Codex. Better profiles on a whole bunch of things, I'm sure there'll be a fair few interesting options for Khorne, and maybe some more interesting character synergy with all the options that Chaos has. Whether or not they'll actually be as good as some of the other Legions in the book though certainly remains to be seen. Obviously though, these are kind of supposed to be tied over rules until they actually get their codex, which I'd guess would be sometime either late in 2022 or early 2023. I'm sure that'll be the main headline news for them, and they'll get way better then. I'm sure things like Angron, probably actual Red Butcher Terminators, and all manner of other unique things will make them into a much more interesting and unique army. In any case though, let me know what you think of the new World Eaters. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below, and anything else that I might have missed. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly be reviewing any other news that we get about Chaos Marines or the World Eaters. I'm looking forward to reviewing Codex Chaos Space Marines when we get it. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.